Well, the cat is finally in handcuffs, but it's not for a dodgy SAPS tender now cancelled by the country's top cop. No, controversial Gauteng businessman Vusimusi Cat Matlala is currently in custody for the attempted hit on his former lover, actress Tebogo Thobejane. Still, anti-corruption investigators are now closing in on the tenderpreneur for the R360 million police deal as well.
There were irregularities in the process. The tender wasn't advertised for long enough. We've got Brigadier Lenono helping tailor this tender and then go and catch the javelin after it was thrown, working for Matlala. We've got the sudden change in directorship, which for all intents and purposes was a way for Mr. Matlala to obscure his beneficial ownership. I mean, we could go on, but I think what it drills down to is, this is the tender process perverted.
Well, we get the full lowdown from our News 24 investigative journalist tailing the cat, Jeff Wicks, next. Later in the show, our training topic looks at the Oyster Bay community's attempts to block a sand mining operation in the Eastern Cape Town. And finally, the very first signs of winter are finally upon us.
To stay tuned to The Lead for every edition, hit the follow and subscribe buttons on our Spotify, Apple, and YouTube podcast channels.
Don't forget you can also mail us, thelead@24.com. My name's Graeme Raubenheimer. Let's chat all this and more right here on The Lead on News 24. To our top story in this edition, and while he's languishing in a prison cell as we speak for an attempted hit on his former lover. Now the walls are closing in on tender don Vusimusi Cat Matlala for a now cancelled R360 million health services SAPS tender, allegedly unduly awarded to his company Medicare 24 Tshwane District. Well, it looks like the cat's legal troubles have only just started, and joining us now from our Johannesburg studios to discuss this in detail is our investigative journalist, Jeff Wicks, who's been on this story for some time now. Jeff, thanks so much for your time. I really do appreciate it. There's been so much that's happened in this particular story since we last spoke. It was eclipsed, if you will, to a degree by this very hot button issue that you may have recalled over the last week of the so-called Afrikaner refugees leaving for the US. There was so much discussion around that. But here in the background, the cat was suddenly arrested. I know that your story was trending on the front page of News 24 during this period. What exactly happened here? I've read through some of the reporting, and it's, as I understand it, it's alleged at this point on behalf of prosecutors that Vusimusi had allegedly paid the sum of 120,000 rand to essentially appoint these assassins to have actress Tebogo Thobejane killed. But that failed some 2 years ago. Help me fill in the blanks here about this rather intriguing story.
Yes, of course. What we understand from our sources on the day he was arrested, Wednesday last week, there was high drama in Midrand. He was traced to the area and then pursued by police and eventually pulled over as he was pulling onto the freeway. And members of the special task force bailed out of an unmarked car and managed to bring his car to a halt, disarm all of his protectors, and have him placed face down on the floor in handcuffs. And this all, of course, relates to a botched assassination on his former lover, Tebogo Thobejane, in October of 2023, and she emerged from the incident unscathed. In what happened in that case was she was leaving a nightclub and a car pulled up alongside hers, and in typical hit fashion, it was sprayed with automatic gunfire. Whilst she was unharmed, one of her good friends who was in the vehicle with her was shot in the chest, and that round actually tracked through her torso and has left her wheelchair bound. So a very sad story about an organized hit, which now has been brought to some sort of progress point, because if the state's case against him proves true, Vusimusi Matlala was the man who ordered this hit.
Sure. How did he appear in court? I know that a lot of your reporting was sort of centered around the fact that he was wearing quite swanky gear, rather expensive outfits, a really, really pricey top that he had on, and he obviously didn't look very chuffed to be there.
No, I think very few people are after spending a night in a police cell and then being brought to court in the back of a police canter. And He cut a beleaguered figure, and it's quite interesting to watch because Cat Matlala is a man who's used to the finer things in life. He splits his time between two mansions, one in Waterkloof Ridge in Pretoria and the other in Midstream Estate in Midrand. And when he strode into the dock in leg shackles, he was wearing a 27,000 Rand Dolce & Gabbana hoodie. But his courtroom couture has not been diminished in his second appearance. Today, he arrived in the dock wearing an Alexander McQueen jersey worth 22,000 Rand. So it really does paint a picture of a man who is currently before court.
Jeff, what happened during today's proceedings? It was the beginning of the formal bail proceedings, getting various particulars onto the record in terms of current address, all of those sort of details, and what particular version of events he might bring in this particular case. Any finality, or has it been held over?
This case has been postponed, and it's something we almost predicted. This is going to be a Schedule 6 bail application, so that means the onus to prove that the interest of justice permit your release rests with the cat. The cat will need to show that, this either the state's case is weak or there are exceptional circumstances that warrant his release. It didn't end up going ahead today. It was postponed for later in the month, and that was by agreement with both the state and his attorneys. But it's going to be very interesting to see what version he puts up in this matter to secure his liberty while awaiting trial.
But anybody sort of seeing the pictures of him appearing inside court would be like, wow, what a heavy-handed police presence. Yeah, you had special task team members within the SAPS flanking him just on the outskirts of the court gallery. Quite unbelievable to see in the context, but we got to remember that this was an alleged attempted hit. Where do we know where the assassins are? Have they been arrested, or the other implicated figures in this particular case, Jeff? How far along are they with their case?
Obviously, the police are taking security very seriously. We see heavily armed members of the Special Task Force attending court and helping transport Mr. Matlala to and from the courtroom. This is a matter where Mr. Matlala was the last of the murder value chain to be arrested, in essence, because we already have two alleged trigger men who were arrested on another matter and then linked to this case, who are before court and who will likely appear with Mr. Matlala when he applies for bail next week.
Sure. And then lastly, just staying on this case, just to round up what we know thus far, the actress Thobejane actually wrote to the SAPS's top figures, including the National Police Commissioner, Fani Masemola, Jeff. Is that right? And she was asking for some sort of clarity on the case moving forward, basically stating that the main sort of figurehead here, alleged to be the cat, had not been found in handcuffs ahead of the arrest. Is that right? And she was sort of pleading for some movement, feeling as if the SAPS was sort of frozen into inaction.
Yes, Ms. Thobejane wrote an open letter which she sent to, obviously the Police Minister Senzo Mqunu, National Police Commissioner Fani Masemola, as well as the NPA's Shamila Batoy. And basically it was an act of desperation, saying that, her life has been under threat for nearly 2 years since she nearly lost her life in that shooting incident. And she has obviously been following the case. She's the complainant in it. And she would have seen that trigger men were arrested. And she obviously had an understanding of who the alleged paymaster was. And that letter was just basically a chronicle of woe, saying, my life has been upended. She risks bankruptcy. She lives day to day, not knowing when someone might come back for her next. And it was just basically highlighting the patent lack of movement in this investigation for going on 2 years. But I think the material difference, Graeme, has come with the police officers who are investigating this case. And that also partially explains the presence of the police in court. This is a crack team of detectives. They were allocated to investigate the assassination of a Vereniging engineer in April last year, and they've managed to indict and charge, again, all of the hitmen and the alleged mastermind in under a year. Because of their sleuthing on that matter, they've picked up other cases, including this one. So, what we see here is progress as a result of good police work. And it's unfortunate that it doesn't happen more often, but I think we must acknowledge it when it does.
Absolutely, especially as so many South Africans now are crying out for better levels of accountability sort of down the line. what's quite interesting is, putting this sort of case aside, of course, the arrest comes only 48 hours, 2 days after the SAPS top brass had thus cancelled the main sort of gist of the story that you've been covering for the longest time, which is this very questionable 360 million rand police tender that the CATS company, Medicare 24 Tshwane District, had scored 1 year ago. From there, you, Jeff, had been investigating quite closely how this particular tender did not make sense, and slowly over time we had started to get the first sort of red flags. The last time we spoke, the lead learned from you that the highest office, of course, Masamola's office, knew full well that this 360 million rand health services tender should never have gone to Matlala. Yet he took his time to sort of cancel the deal, only really sent a warning letter for after 2 months after an internal audit had sort of raised major red flags. And then by that point, CAT had already gotten 18.5 million rand. This is now considered irregular state spending. And then, as I've just alluded to, 2 days later, the SAPS, now finally earlier in May, has cancelled this questionable deal. Remind us, Jeff, very importantly to those who don't know the story, again, what that tender sort of sets out for, and why did it only happen now that that tender has thus been cancelled?
So what happened, Graeme, was that, Mr. Matlala has diverse business interests, and he appeared on our radar during our Tembisa hospital investigation when Babita Deokaran flagged that 3 of his shelf companies were making money from that facility, and that happened 3 weeks before she was assassinated. We obviously kept an eye on Mr. Matlala, and last year in June, this little-known company that runs out of a Boksburg strip mall won this 360 million rand health services tender, and that's to provide all manner of service to the police in terms of medical screenings, retirement boardings, all of the sort of occupational health value adds that one would expect from an employer. Now, we obviously followed the award of the tender, and our reportage has been sustained from the beginning of the year up until this point. And what we found were several severe irregularities that definitely warranted further scrutiny and could actually have been used as grounds for complete cancellation. It was News 24 who revealed that Brigadier Petunia Lenono, who was a member of the bid specification and bid evaluation committees, resigned 3 weeks before the tender was awarded and then was quiet for several months before taking up a job with Matlala. That is a ground alone which could have seen Masemola cancel this tender outright.
Absolutely.
And this is where it gets important, especially for police management, because now we see the independent or the investigating Directorate against corruption taking charge of a criminal probe which centers on this tender. And the investigating Directorate will look at all of the police officers who had a hand in awarding it, and will also examine what was done after police were warned that there was not sound basis to award this tender and that there were irregularities and possible criminal activity. It's going to be key going forward, Graeme, and may royal top SAPS management, because they are now under criminal investigation themselves by IDAC.
What I find super, super interesting about all of this is that in your reporting, Jeff, you've basically exposed in your timeline of events how the company had suddenly changed directorship halfway through, and that, as you understand it, according to your sources at the moment, is again one of the reasons why this contract has now since been cancelled, because of that allegation of fronting. What are the other as we call it, the brass tack sort of issues at the end of the day that you believe, according to your sources, has seen the SAPS now and thus cancelled deals? What are the main sort of finite criteria other than the fronting of the change up in directors?
Well, I mean, where do you start? There were irregularities in the process. The tender wasn't advertised for long enough. We've got Brigadier Lenono helping tailor this tender and then go and catch the javelin after it was thrown, working for Matlala. We've got the sudden change in directorship, which for all intents and purposes was a way for Mr. Matlala to obscure his beneficial ownership. I mean, we could go on, but I think what it drills down to is, this is the tender process perverted. And this is the whole point of having a tender process. It's rigorous due diligence to ensure that not only does the organization spending the money get value for that cash, but also to ensure that the tender goes to the right service provider that's not going to collapse less than a year into delivering on this tender. And that's what happened with Matlala. He ran into performance issues earlier this year. He cannot deliver. The police internal documents themselves show that he recorded 100% underperformance across 3 of the 5 work streams. Sure. And, what this really shows is a patent lack of due diligence. And now there must be accountability, because the real tragedy in this is the police have 180,000 employees. Now they have no health and risk service provider. If it goes out to tender again, this is a process which will take months. What happens to those people in this time? This actually represents a national security risk, and it should be taken seriously.
So in other words, that 18.5 million rand that the CAT thus got, which is now termed as sort of wasteful spending, right, because the tender has been brought under serious question and is now the subject of a criminal probe, could have been that taxpayers' money, of course, that we all shell out every single month, and it could have paid for that very nice top that the CAT was wearing in the dock of the court that he was in today, facing for a separate matter. So we only know that the CAT got 18.5 million, but your reporting sort of points to a big question mark. Could that figure have been more? And we just don't know yet, right?
Yeah, I mean, that figure is likely higher. And I think when we start considering the role of the National Commissioner, we must remember that he will be measured against the rigors of the Public Finance Management Act. And his role as accounting officer is to prevent fruitless, wasteful, and irregular expenditure. Now, we know that Matlala was paid 18.5 million rand as of the end of January. And that's when Masemola was first warned that the tender was dubious and it should be cancelled. The rands and cents are going to count in this matter. And, the police are keeping this secret. It's very closely guarded from their perspective. We've asked them repeatedly and they've refused to answer exactly how much this man has been paid up until the point the tender was terminated. And I think when that comes out, it's going to be very, very interesting to see how Masemola positions his defense about what he did or failed to do. But perhaps we're a bit too early in the game for those type of questions.
Now we have to go through possibly a whole new rigorous process to get the tender going again. When that is done properly, it could take months, potentially years. In the meantime, thousands and thousands of SAPS officials will now have to do without the services that was normally in the past provided by Metropolitan, as I understand. Is that right? And in the interim, you've even gotten word from some of the CAT's subcontractors that they've not even been paid, that they've not even seen a penny of the 18.5 million for the work that actually wasn't even done at the end of the day. So many interesting avenues left to sort of uncover in the story, right? What could we expect next?
I mean, Graeme, and our readers can expect this. This is a project that we've been running for several months. We have no intention of bringing it to a close, and there's much more to report. Not only when it comes to the wave of bad debt the CAT has left in his wake, but it's going to become important for our national security. And we will follow the money, and we will try to understand exactly how much he was paid and what happened to all that cash.
We appreciate it, Jeff. Thanks so much for your time. I really do appreciate all your fine reporting and for always chatting and giving us time here on The Lead. I look forward to your next exclusives to drop over the next couple of weeks or so.
Thank you for having me, Graeme.
To our trending topic now, and residents of a small coastal hamlet in the Eastern Cape are currently at a standoff with a local mining company. Schoonmakers Mining has applied to sand mine a beach south of locals' homes in Oyster Bay. It's an area stretching over roughly 7 soccer fields. The town's about a half an hour's drive from the Tsitsikamma National Park. It's known for its rich flora and fauna, archaeology and shipwrecks. The mining company insists disruption will be minimal because it won't be using heavy machinery, and that, among other reasons, mining the sand would actually prevent unnecessary dunes building up in the streets of people's homes. But the Oyster Bay Residents Association is dead set against this move. It claims the mining will impact tourism, as well as the natural habitat and breeding site of the previously near endangered African black oyster catcher bird. An online petition challenging the mining license application has thus far gotten more than 1,600 signatures. Algoa Consulting Mining Engineers has in the meantime quashed claims that it didn't follow the letter in the sand mining public participation process, which, according to journalist Lamiz Amaji, has since been extended now to draw more comments on the matter. But that's only until the 20th of May, which may be a little too late by the time you've heard this podcast. In the meantime, the miners argue they'll leave the sand dunes better suited for the African black oyster catcher once they're done in the area. And finally, the very first signs of winter are upon us. The Western Cape braced for a cold snap from today, bringing strong winds and the potential for mountaintop snowfall. Cape Town, though, for the most part, has seen but minor scattered showers and overcast conditions. Still, the SA Weather Service says as much as 50 millimeters of rain is expected in the northern and eastern Cape provinces from Tuesday. We can also expect choppy waters along the coastline. Forecasters say the mercury is expected to drop as the icy cold front moves further inland over the week. The City of Johannesburg's Emergency Medical Services has already warned residents to use heating methods responsibly and not to leave appliances or fires unattended. Many of you in the comments section are worried that this cold spell could see the return of Eskom's power cuts, whilst others are just happy for the cooler conditions for now. We'll keep you posted on any developments there. From handcuffing the cat to digging out the jerseys for winter. Welcome to the start of this probably going to be a very busy news week here on The Lead. We appreciate all the engagement in our last show with investigations editor Peter Du Toit asking the question if perhaps our President Cyril Ramaphosa might be wasting his time jetting off to the US for talks with President Donald Trump this week. It's been one of our most engaging episodes yet. Please keep it coming. If you'd like to send us any of your formal mails, comments, even voice notes, we'll play them on The Lead. You can mail us thelead@24.com. That's 24 as in numerals. That's to be heard in our next edition. Of course, you can hit the follow and subscribe buttons on our Spotify, Apple, and YouTube podcast channels. That's to get notified of every edition. We're dropping them Monday to Thursday at 7 p.m. My name's Graeme Raubenheimer, and so long as there's news, we'll have The Lead.